The United States plans to station intermediate-range missiles, such as the SM-6, the Tomahawk, and hypersonic weapons, such as the Dark Eagle, in Germany as of 2026. These systems are to be deployed by the 56th U.S. Artillery Command, which was reactivated in November 2021 in Wiesbaden. The SM-6 has a range of 370 to 500 kilometers. The Tomahawk cruise missile is capable of penetrating enemy territory at low altitude and taking out command centers, bunkers, and radar installations, while the Dark Eagle is a hypersonic weapon with a range of up to 2,700 kilometers that flies at up to 17 times the speed of sound and is maneuverable as it approaches its target. These systems are nuclear capable and can be launched from Germany against strategic targets deep inside Russian territory to hit Russian command centers, among other targets. Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization. It's January 7th, 2026, and you just heard the opening paragraph from a statement released on January 5th by the International Peace Coalition. Now, the question that's posed by this is, who's behind this suicidal policy? The question of long-range missile deployment in Germany is part of the policy that was foisted upon former Chancellor Olaf Scholz in July 2024 by then-President Joe Biden. And Biden was speaking on behalf of the Brzezinski, Albright, Obama, Blinken policymakers who are committed to the neocon project of destruction of Russia, breakup of Russia, and the seizing of its raw materials. So far, President Trump has not reversed the Biden decision. President Putin responded by saying that Russia would have its own intermediate range systems deployed, targeting the West, including Germany and the United Kingdom. This paves the way to a nuclear World War III, with Germany being the first casualty. This will not only break the potential, if it's done, to normalize relations with Russia, but will put the U.S. and Russia on a suicidal course toward mutual self-destruction. What kind of lunatics think that this is a good idea? Now, Biden, we know who he is. He's a longtime war hawk, a senile puppet of the military-industrial complex, and as I mentioned, the Obama, Blinken, Albright school of diplomacy. But how different is that from John Bolton, Pompeo, and others? Remember, Trump ran for president pledging to remove these dangerous sociopaths by dismantling the so-called deep state. Well, what's happened in recent weeks and months that seems to change that? Some Trump supporters are saying that the kidnapping of Venezuelan President Maduro is part of a strategy to undermine and destroy the deep state. Well, if so, that would be useful. But breaking international law, returning to the idea of the law of the jungle, is not necessarily the best way to defeat those who claim the power of the rules-based order to do precisely the same thing. At the press conference that he held after the kidnapping of Maduro, President Trump turned his back on his campaign promises made in 2016 and 2024. He said that the U.S. will reject nation building, will reject regime change. Now, similarly, his promises to Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu to back Israel's war against Iran put him on the side of the Zionist neocons, such as Pompeo and Bolton, who he's denounced, as well as McCain and his old adversary, Marco Rubio. So which version of Trump is acceptable? The one who denounced the neocons and nation building, who denounced the war hawks and the global corporate cartels who oppose the idea of sovereign nation states? Is the president listening now to the people who he denounced repeatedly during his campaigns for president and his time in office? Now, we know the City of London is desperate to break up the potential for U.S. Russian normalization. They fear the collapse of the current international financial system, which is underway. They fear that that will take power away from them and will put them in a subordinate position to Russia and China. But Russia and China have offered to include the U.S. and Europe in the Belt and Road Initiative, in the BRICS, in the idea of mutual benefit using infrastructure and resource development as the basis for collaboration. Now, this brings up the question of who's pushing Trump in this direction. We saw his visit with King Charles in London, where he sat down with the military industrial complex hawks from Silicon Valley and the Silicon Valley of the United Kingdom, where billions of dollars of deals were made to incorporate artificial intelligence into the war machine, the hybrid warfare capability. But let's look a little deeper. Who is Marco Rubio, and what put him in a position of such influence? He has more power in his hands right now than anyone, probably since the emergence of Kissinger as National Security Advisor and Secretary of State under under Nixon. Now, Rubio has ties to the CIA networks that go back to the Bay of Pigs. He's the foremost supporter among congressmen of the veterans organizations of the Bay of Pigs. And who are the Bay of Pigs? These are anti-Castro mercenaries who were deployed by the CIA to try to overthrow the Cuban government. And they lost. But many of them continued to be opponents of President Kennedy. Some may have been involved in his assassination. They certainly have been involved in various kinds of wars and terror since then. So the first question is, what was the influence of the Bay of Pigs veterans on Rubio's decision to go after Maduro? Now also, he's backed by a Zionist billionaire named Paul Singer, who supported him in 2015, 2016. Singer is one of the leading billionaires in the United States supporting Netanyahu and Netanyahu's war of genocide. Now, Rubio is serving not only as Secretary of State, but as National Security Advisor, and now with a new job as Viceroy of Venezuela, but also in charge of the CIA's regime change operation, the U.S. Agency for International Development. Now, think back to 2016. Trump correctly identified Rubio as Little Marco, as a puppet of the Bush networks, the neocon networks, the Warhawk networks. And the campaign in 2016 between the two of them at times was very nasty, with Rubio at one point saying that during the debate, Donald Trump went to the bathroom, had his makeup redone, and came back looking as though he had wet his pants. Why is Trump accepting Rubio now as a leading figure in his administration? This is the role of the neocons, or the ploy by the neocons, to grab the president and do what they were unable to do with Russiagate. Because don't forget, Marco Rubio was tied to the whole Russiagate apparatus, which included John Bolton and Obama's national security team. So I urge you to read our statement on the missiles in Germany, our call to reconsider this and stop the deployment of U.S. missiles in Germany. Read it, sign it, circulate it, and then watch my dialogue later today with Helga Zepp-LaRouche that's going to be at 11 a.m. Eastern Time and will be archived after that for you. It's essential that the American people speak out. The arguments for the kidnapping of Maduro don't hold up. But what's behind them is the assertion that the neocons have the right to run a unipolar order, what Blinken famously called the rules-based order, which means the Wall Street and City of London make the rules and you're forced to line up and accept them. Instead, we need diplomacy and cooperation for mutual benefit. That's what the LaRouche organization is fighting for, and I urge you to join us in winning that fight against the likes of little Marco, or as he's sometimes called, little Narco Rubio.